Hey there. Do you got anxiety?
Do you got-
Do you got anxiety? Because I think a lot of people, they definitely do struggle with anxiety. I did, and still have moments where I do. But I have learned some ways of working through that anxiety and not allowing it to control my life. And that is something I want to share with you guys. So let's jump right into that. Well, welcome back to thoughtraid, a show where we take on thoughts and find better ways of thinking about them. I'm Brandon, this is Tim, and today we're talking about anxiety. Hey,
boy.
Good old anxiety.
So here's a question for the chat. Can you guess which of us is more anxious? 50 DKP to whoever gets it correct.
50D, what is that?
DKP?
What is DKP?
You never played World of Warcraft, did you?
No, I'm not.
Dragon kill points, Brandon.
Oh.
It was like the currency that you have to spend to get gear item drops.
Interesting. Yes, I never played that, but I did play other MMORPGs. Nor did I play Final Fantasy, but you never know. That might change. Everyone keeps reeling me into that game. I mean, Bryce, you know that. Like, there's I don't know, 5 or 10 people in our community that play Final Fantasy, and they always laud high praise over the greatness that is Final Fantasy 14. So that may change, but that's not the topic for today.
We're talking about anxiety.
And do you have it?
Yeah, got anxiety.
Yes. An anxiety mustache.
What would that look like?
I feel like it would be something that would grow on your forehead.
So instead of like a milk mustache, you just have
you have maybe a unibrow, but it's on your forehead.
It's a big wrinkle.
It is. This I feel like
you have one.
Exactly. Exactly.
Brandon's got anxiety.
I feel like this is where anxiety ends up being displayed. It's right up here. And the more you have, the more anxious you are. But at least I used to think that, but now I see people that have way more than me that don't seem to be as anxious as I am. So it's not a true tale. It's just once upon a time someone said this is the result of being anxious, and I took it to heart. Anyway.
Here's a question for you, though. I've been thinking about this because being a Christian is kind of interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like there's this concept that once you become a Christian and you know the Lord, all your worries and your woes go away.
Poof.
But, coming from a background where I was not raised Christian, it just seems like there are more anxious Christians than there are anxious people who are not Christians. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's I think it's simple. I feel like a lot of people, before they know that there's a God, really, honestly, or even care if he does exist, there's a lot of things that we view as sin that the world just doesn't care about and doesn't view as sin, like pornography or drugs or over drinking or sex before marriage or outside of marriage, or a lot of different things would be considered for us wrong, but for them, it just is what it is.
I don't know, because before I was a Christian, I was not a Christian, and I acknowledge I didn't want to have sex till I was married just because it makes sense. And other things, there are so many other things that are sins that aren't just homosexuality and sex before marriage and all that. Just having lustful thoughts, or just saying F you, having egregious thoughts towards people, being short-tempered, all that's a sin too. And it's I acknowledged before I was a Christian, hey, this probably is not healthy.
Yeah, but then again, you also grew up in America where it is mostly Judeo-Christian values, so that is baked into the culture of America and taken for granted. Mm-hmm. So it's you have that, you might not have that in a place like India or a place I don't know. I don't know.
You don't think so?
I don't think, not to the same degree. There's just varying degrees of cultural rights and wrongs in different places.
Well, I mean, cultural whatever, being angry at somebody for dumb reasons, it's people, no matter where you are, it's acknowledged, hey, this isn't healthy. I can't think of a single culture out there where being angry at somebody is healthy.
Or being anxious all the time is considered. I mean, no, it's not considered healthy. People recognize generally that anxiety is not healthy. But I will say that I know people who are not Christians who look at anxiety as like a disease and like, oh, I have anxiety. And then they just internalize that as they are anxious and that's that. So I know that like a lot of people, they just kind of like put it under a mental illness and then just write off with that. And it's just a way of just, oh, this is just what it is. And they're not even trying to correct the issue because now they've written it off as this is just a sickness or something.
Well, help me understand this then, because I'm thinking, we were talking about Final Fantasy and anxiety and all this stuff. I remember some of the times I felt most anxious. The way Final Fantasy 11 specifically works, or used to work anyways, was you'd kill a monster, right? Yeah. And there'd be like, I don't know, 5 rabbits in the room. And one of those rabbits is considered a placeholder, right? So that specific rabbit, if you kill it, when it respawns, it could be a special monster. Could respawn as a special monster, right?
Interesting.
And so that's the theme of the game. I remember doing that, trying to get specific items, and my heart would just be like, it'd be 10 seconds till the placeholder could spawn, and it would spawn, and it's like, who's going to get access? Like, if you commit an action to the monster or whatever in the game, you claim it, and nobody else can get it, then you get a chance at the whatever item it drops if you can kill it. But I remember thinking, wow, I'm just like I'd get the sweats and everything. It was such a big deal. And then later on, when there would be like these monsters that would spawn once every, I don't know, 7 days, and it would have a window of 10 seconds every hour. It's like it was amplified. I'm like, is that anxiety or is that something else?
That could also be adrenaline.
Yeah, what are people saying here?
We've got some people. We've got Eden. He's saying, this intro gave me a surprise. Here I am just playing my Fallout 4 waiting for a Stellaris game. You've never been to Puerto Rico. Being angry at each other is in the blood. And then Axeman says, the HUD and the chat are invisible. Thank you. I always forget that part. Thank you. I'm working on it.
Brandon, you fail at it every single time.
I'm not doing as bad as I used to, okay? Like, there was a time where you had to pass a little reminder so that I would...
Yeah, like 2 weeks ago. Come on, Brandon.
But the last time I remembered halfway through, so there's that. Thank you, Axe. I appreciate it. But anyways, now that should be popping up, and so should the new chat.
Right, so I guess that would be anxiety, too, or just thinking, like...
Well, it could be anxiety. What you described also could just be adrenaline.
Yeah.
Because there's like a fine line between anxiety and feeling adrenaline, where you have the rush to be able to get a hold of something super fast. Anxiety, more specifically, is just like this constant feeling that something is wrong, and you don't know how to fix it, and it's there, and like you're going to fail, you're going to suffer, you're going to go through something that's not enjoyable, and you can't be at peace. And that's more anxiety. The desire to get a hold of that special object is more of like an adrenaline rush. Like I need to get to that. Like that's not what I'm necessarily talking about today. I'm talking about the pervasive, invading, unhelpful thinking that's just constantly saying you're going to fail. You've already failed. You're never going to succeed. You've done something wrong. You're whatever. Just this constant taking your peace away. Some people call it stress. Some people call it anxiety, some people call it something else, but like those are the two major ways people refer to what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so if you guys are watching, and if you're watching this later, I'd love to hear it in the comments below. What gives you anxiety the way that Brandon's positioning it? What causes you to go in those places of, oh no, I've already failed, I'm a piece of crap, what am I going to do? Just that sense of hopelessness, whatever it is, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, do you feel that?
Do I feel what I just described?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
How? Like, what causes that for you?
Well, for me, like, the things that generally make me anxious is the topic, and I've talked about this many times, am I doing enough? Like, that's a very pervasive thought that I have to deal with of, like, am I doing enough for ThoughtRaid? Am I doing enough in my job? Am I doing enough to be where I'm supposed to be? And, like, that just steals my peace all the time. If I don't recognize that and take that to God, I just melt because it's just like, I don't know. If I were to compare myself to other people my age, I feel like I'm failing, so it's just like, but at the same time, I barely have enough energy to do anything more than what I'm doing, so I feel stuck, Or in other places that I feel anxiety is related to, like, pain. Like, for instance, the thought of persecution, the real reality of that potentially happening in America sometimes makes me feel anxious. I sit and I worry, like, and again, then that connects with the thought of, am I doing enough to, if I can't prevent this, to prevent this? Just like, am I going to go somewhere tomorrow and then next thing you know, okay, well, you're a Christian, we're going to target you now, like, you can't do what you're doing, you're going to be, like, you're going to jail, or flat out, we're going to kill you. Like, that's a reality for some Christians in certain parts of the world. You go to China, there's the secret police. They take people that don't follow the Buddhism or something of that nature, they take Christians, they either try to re-educate Christians by, again, abuse, or they just flat out kill them. Or you have, in the Middle East, there's a crap ton of persecution, a lot of Christians being pulled out and shot and murdered. Like, that's a thing that we take for granted in the United States. But that's a real thing, and it's just as likely to happen here as it's happened anywhere else. It's just by the grace of God and the people doing what we're supposed to do that we're preventing that from happening. But there are... Anyways, I'm not going to go into that. So that's the things that generally make me anxious.
Politics.
Bryce is saying, bringing my ideas to the table will make me anxious. I never know how people will react, and dealing to the complexity of how people look at me and my past. In China, there's a state... In China, there is state atheism, propaganda, the ideology of communism as a state religion.
Well, real quick, like, just reading that first comment, let me bogart this for a second. You said, I never know how people will react in dealing with the complexity of how people look at me in my past. Brandon, this is a question for you, I guess. What's the difference between being nervous and being anxious? Because I can relate to that. I can relate to always wondering, man, what are these people going to think of me? I don't feel like I have value in this conversation. And I was just nervous.
So nervous is situational, whereas anxiety is more pervasive. So, like, if you're about ready, so before we start Thought Raid, I feel nervous because I'm thinking, can I provide an entertaining stream for people? Can I bring good content to the table? I get nervous. It's a last minute feeling that just, it's kind of more closely related to adrenaline, but it's just this feeling of nerves flaring up of, like, to be successful at what I'm about ready to do. Anxiety is more pervasive. It happens whether I'm about ready to go live or about ready to do something new. It's just constantly there. And it's just plaguing my thoughts, or at least it's plaguing it so long as I give it a thought. And that's a key point in dealing with the anxiety that I'll talk about, of how to take those thoughts captive. But otherwise, it's more pervasive, whereas nerves is something that flares up in the moment when you're about ready to do something you're not certain is going to be good or bad or whatever. So I think that's the difference with that. And then fear, which is another layer of all the negative emotions, that also kind of lines closer to nervousness, but not quite at the same time. Whereas, like, I'm afraid of spiders. So, like, if a spider is present, I'm afraid because I don't know if that spider is going to bite me, if it's going to crawl on me, whatever. So I'm afraid of spiders. And it's more linked to a specific activity. So I fear being on the stage. Will I feel nervous before going on the stage? Yes. But that nervousness could be greater if I'm already afraid of public speaking. But if I'm not, then I'll just have general nerves, and I'll move past them as I go on the stage and go through all that. So anxiety is continuous feeling, like I'm always feeling my mind is ruminating on something negative. Nervousness is what I feel right before I go live or before I do something I'm not sure if I'm going to do well in or not. And if fear is something that I'm a specific thing that I want to avoid, and that's like. Then you get into things like phobias and stuff where it goes in the more extreme cases.
Talking about this whole pervasive thing, anxiety, I don't think I've ever felt that in my life. And I wonder, I know I felt apathetic about certain things, or maybe I'm just thinking that I do. because a lot of the times I just don't give things a thought because it's like, whatever, it's going to be okay. And I wonder if that's laziness or apathy, and if that's like the opposite of anxiety, because that I mean, apathy's bad in and of itself. Or I don't want to say it's bad, it's unhealthy.
It can be.
Yeah. But the way you're describing it, I don't know, you think some people just are not anxious? Or do you think everybody has a layer of anxiety?
No, I think so, because if there was no one that wasn't anxious, we would have no way to gauge what that looks like. And I do think that it's God's good plan for some people that are going to be more inclined towards it. Not to say that God wants people to deal with things, I'm not saying that, but like everyone has strengths, and not being afraid, I think, is something that is strength that God gives to people. And that's why you have the far extreme cases of people that are literal psychopaths that don't feel any sort of emotion on the more extreme end of things. So they don't feel fear or regret or anything of that nature whatsoever. They're just incapable of that.
Did you watch all those criminal documentaries that have been popping up on YouTube?
I haven't, but I do enjoy good like murder mysteries and stuff of that nature.
Man, there was this one where this guy came on, and basically he had this roommate, and he was like, "Hey, could you take me to the store?" And he gets in the car, and his roommate's driving him to the store, and he just pulls out a gun. His roommate's like, "What's that?" He's like, "Well, I'm gonna kill you." He's like, "Drive." And so he drove out in the middle of nowhere, shot the dude, and he was like gurgling, and he was telling the officer this stuff. And he was like, "Yeah, he just started gurgling, so I shot him again, and he made this noise, and I pulled him out in the ditch once he was dead, and I covered him with a few leaves, and I went about my day." And the officer was like, "Do you feel bad about it?" "No, sir." And there was like no self-preservation there, which is kind of weird.
That's psychopathy. That's where the person just does not feel remorse or empathy or anything naturally. And there is a way that could be a good thing, because I know of David Wood, who is a psychopath that got saved, and God delivered him from that kind of stuff, but he's still a psychopath. He still doesn't really feel like, I think the term psychopath has an emotion linked to it for obvious reasons of what they're capable of. But it's not necessarily has to be a negative thing, because David Wood is a Christian who has a wife and kids. Even though he doesn't really feel certain things, that still works out for them in that family. So that just shifted my perspective of what's possible. They are very capable of much evil, but they're also capable of good. So I thought that was interesting.
It's true for all of us. But
if we don't have psychopaths... If we don't have people that don't naturally worry and ruminate over things, then people like me wouldn't know what is possible. You are an important person in my life because you show me a reality that I could live by that I don't normally live by, that I don't have to worry about these things. Yeah, I'm serious. Yeah. We've talked about this over the years, but you're a close friend of mine because you teach me how to flow through life without constantly trying to hold on to everything like this. So Eden, since you're watching this right now, he is a great example of me telling you one step at a time. He's taught me the whole one step at a time thing and not striving so hard, because I've watched him over the years, things just happen for him, and he's not striving. He's not really trying to make these things happen most of the time, although I know you have attempted to do that from time to time.
So I guess the past year I've been trying really hard to make something happen, and it's been really tough lately because God's got me in this place where he's like, "I don't want you to try so hard." I'm like, "God, I don't have an employer. If I don't do stuff, nobody's going to do it for me, And he's like, "Really? What about me?" I was like, "Oh, crap." But, just being in that liminal space. We were talking about this earlier. Being in that liminal space of should I do or should I don't? I wonder if this is the closest to anxiety I've had, because I'll wake up and I have to battle feelings of am I doing the right thing? And that never used to be a question that would come up. I always knew doing the right thing, and if I'm not, God's going to correct it. But oddly, this year I've been having this thought, okay, maybe I'm not doing the right thing, and maybe my heart is just hardened, and I'm not willing to listen to God, so that's why he's not telling me otherwise. That's a crappy place to be.
That's a place I've been many times.
Yeah, but as far as it being giving me anxiety. Like I wonder if like I have a beat of like psychopath in me or something, because I don't really feel that as consistently, even though I do feel it. Like it's really easy to go back into that space of whatever, it's gonna be okay, I'll figure it out.
Well, there's a difference between feeling it sometimes to not feeling at all. Like, big difference. A psychopath does not feel anything at all. He says, mind you, I am a product of how I was raised. Productivity and heavy effort is what I grew up with. And that's honestly what I grew up with too. And that's where a lot of my anxieties come from. Like, I have a lot of anxiety because I grew up in a middle-class family that if it didn't get done, no one else is going to do it for you. And in the most general sense, that is true. But you have shown me that that's not always the case. That sometimes God does just present things to you, and it's not a striving thing. And there is examples of that throughout the Bible of, like, I think it was Elijah, who during the famine, God took care of him in the wilderness by giving a raven bringing him meat in a small brook. Like, he didn't do anything except be with God, and God took care of him by a raven with meat and a brook. And there's other examples of that. It's not like the always do this thing, but it's God is capable. And you have to think about people who have cerebral palsy. Like, they can't do physical activities because their body is just too stiff to be able to do that. But God still takes care of people like that. So anyways, so anxiety. Some people like me deal with anxiety a lot. And over the years, I've learned how to cope with anxiety and not allow it to control my life. And that's what I wanted to talk about today, is just how do you handle anxiety? How do you work through it? And one of the most helpful turning point things that I saw getting to where I got, when I was still going to Agape Faith Church, my youth pastor this was Chris. Chris was the youth pastor at the time.
Up in his office where he... Never mind. I was going to make a joke, but... It's not appropriate.
Up in his office, he had this picture of a cowboy on a horse, and the statement was, courage was being absolutely afraid and saddling up anyways. And then my mind saw that, and it latched onto that image, and it stuck with me, and it's helped me over the years. Because one of the things I've learned is that I don't know if it's really possible to have absolutely no anxiety whatsoever. But I do know it's possible not to live by anxiety and not to ruminate in it, to just kind of stop it when you recognize that it's there.
This makes me think about, and if you guys are watching and you're big anime fans, please connect with us because we like anime.
Yes, we do.
But we have a group every other Sunday where we watch anime, and we've been going through My Hero Academia. Mm-hmm. And it's my first time watching it. It's pretty freaking awesome.
Same here.
But I'm just thinking about Deku, the main character, and he's got no quirk, he's got no special abilities, and everybody else does. And all this crazy stuff starts happening, and it's like he's scared, like he's shaking. But then his body goes on autopilot, and he just leaps into action where it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And it just makes me think about anxiety, because it can prevent you from doing things. But it's like if you have a purpose that's bigger than your anxiety, you realize, okay, well, it's worth going through it. And
yes.
I'm just thinking about, I was talking to somebody the other day about having a purpose for their life because they're stuck right now, and it is really easy to get stuck when you don't have something that's pulling you forward, because it's just like, well, let me go over here and put out this fire. I guess I'll go over here and like move this pillow around. I'll go over here and surf this website for a bit. And it's like, well, what are you doing with your time? Well, I'm just doing whatever. Okay, well, it makes sense that you're depressed because you don't have any like focus.
Right.
And I think the closest I've ever come to having anxious thoughts is those moments where I lose sight of where I'm going, because it's like I'm just going in circles. Kind of like, prime example, you go to pet stores and you sometimes see animals. Like, I watched this documentary that I wish I could unsee about animal cruelty. And they had, basically it was about these monkeys in Japan, or not Japan, like China or something. It was some Asian country. It's very inhumane. They're just like locked in there, and they're forced to like eat these like liquids and whatever. Ew. And they're just like, it was somebody that had worked there, and they filmed all this stuff, covertly. But like there was this monkey that was just going in circles in its cage backwards because it had a really small living space, and when it wasn't in that living space, it was being tortured. It's like it's going crazy because there's just like circumstances that happen to it.
Wow.
You know, and I think we can put ourselves into those boxes sometimes because we don't think, okay, well, I need to have a focus. I actually need to do something with what I've been given instead of, oh, well, these are my circumstances. I guess I'll just make do with what I've got.
Yeah. The biggest thing that I could say to that, and that I was thinking about, is if you're going to wait until the things that make you anxious are no longer there, you're going to accomplish nothing, or very little at the very least. Because a part of life is reaching out into places that don't yet exist and making something or finding something there. I'm sorry that last bit of coffee wasn't pleasant for you.
That was horrible. That definitely was not blessed by the Lord. Taste of the Lord and you shall something.
Satan farted on it. I'm so sorry. Anyways, you know, if you're waiting for the thing that's making you anxious to be resolved, you're just never going to get resolved. You can't wait for it to be resolved for you to finally take action. You have to move through those places of you don't really know what's going to happen. Like we're never going to have a full picture of the situation that we're moving into. We're going to have ideas, and we can pull from some of our past experiences to make somewhat of a roadmap. But I can tell you for a fact that where I'm at right now is not where I thought I was going to be back when I was a teenager or a kid even. Like when I was a kid, I wanted to be a judge. We are far from that trajectory.
I mean, you're pretty judgmental.
Wow.
What are the people saying? I can't read it.
Seth is saying, courage for me is getting through the unknown. Bravery is knowing and still pushing through. Courage is getting through the unknown. Bravery is knowing and still pushing through.
Did you copy and paste that from Instagram, Seth? What's the first thing he said? Something about
he said you might have sociopathic tendencies from learned experiences. Psychopath is one-way road for not feeling regret or empathy. So like I was saying, like it's just because you don't really feel things here and there but do in other places, like you cannot feel it at all to be a psychopath, but you feel some things. You're not literally a psychopath by definition.
Oh, freaking Eden. Bryce, you should come watch My Hero with us.
This is your official invitation to...
Actually, I don't know if I want him in my house.
Wow! This is your official invitation, barring whatever Tim wants, I guess.
Seth has an invitation, but he lives in freaking Texas.
So the first real step of dealing with anxiety is you got to take a step of faith out before things get better. Because if you wait for them to happen, they may never will. And the questions that loom in your head may never be answered. So if you're waiting for that moment, it's not going to come. And I had to learn that. I had to learn because what I discovered when I took those steps of faith, when I took risks, was that things were often not as bad as I was assuming them to be. For instance, I thought that I was alone in my struggles with porn. Not the case at all. Many people deal with porn. We bring it back down to zero again, I know.
I'm just thinking of all these people in a room struggling together with porn.
A lot. Like, a lot of people do more than you realize.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't have
So there's that is an example. Or, for instance, did you derail my thoughts? There's other things too that I was afraid about. I oftentimes when interacting with people, my brain tends to think of negative outcomes, and most of the time it never happens. Like there's been many times where I'm talking to someone and it didn't go quite the way I was expecting, and then now between that time and the time I see them again, I think of all these negative outcomes. Like they're probably thinking this about me. Oh, they think I'm an idiot, or maybe they're planning.
We were talking about that before the stream about how we have a mutual friend, and I was worrying that this person hates me.
And none of that was a reality whatsoever.
Well, that's unconfirmed.
Well, but in general, it's usually never at all what we fear it to be.
What's Axeman saying?
He's saying, what about things like panic attacks? Where can you rationalize the fear and anxiety, but it still grips you? So what exactly are you asking in that? Because I think I understand what you're saying, but it would be good to just kind of reword that, Axeman. what about panic attacks? Like when you can rationalize things, where can you rationalize the fear and anxiety, but still it grips you? Like, while I'm going to try to like answer this until I see a response to that, which I think will pop up in a moment here. Pretty much when I encounter a panic attack, because I sometimes for some reason certain places on the road triggers a panic attack within me. The way I end up dealing with that panic attack is I recognize, like, I have to stop the train in my head. Like, okay, breathe. I gotta breathe, deep breathing, like...
Demon Slayer.
Yeah. Water breathing, fifth form. Total concentration breathing. No.
Spoilers, I haven't seen it.
It's really good. Really good. But anyways, deep breathing is very important when I start to have a panic attack. And then recognizing that it is a panic attack. It's like when you're in a nightmare and recognizing that you're in a nightmare can help you stop the nightmare. Like it's that same kind of thing. It's hard when it onsets, but when you notice it, you can begin to do something about it. I don't know if I've ever done that.
Well, first, I don't have many nightmares, but I don't think I've ever... I mean, maybe I have. But I don't think I've ever been in a nightmare and said, oh, this is a nightmare. I've stopped worrying about it.
Well, you can't just stop. Like, it's just... life has to continue when you're having a panic attack. Like, you have to keep moving. Like, you can... If you can stop. Like... For some reason, it hits me when I'm on the road, so I can't just like pull over off the side of the road.
What's it like? You just start, or what?
Well, it's just like I have a moment of just like like my heart rate increases, my breathing shallows, and my mind, I can't think straight. So I have to like my mind just goes. it's just not good. So I have to breathe heavy, and if I can, I try to focus my mind on one thing, like meditation, like one thing. Like all the other thoughts, I turn them to static, which is not easy. But so instance, I might focus my mind on my air conditioning, like the sound that it makes, until all I hear is the air conditioning. Huh. And then that can help me like...
I never knew that you had panic attacks, Brandon.
Yeah, they don't happen as much as they used to by any means, but like they sometimes do. It just hits me, and so just focusing on something else gets my mind to move on.
So, do you guys have? Well, just real quick, do you guys have panic attacks? And if so, what's that like? Because I've never had one that just doesn't compute to me.
Yeah, Axe is saying like when my anxiety gets so bad, my body just locks up and I hold my breath to the verge of passing out, and in my mind I understand what is happening, but despite that it still happens. What do you do in those types of cases? So yeah, like I said, there's a part of like recognizing the situation. You're seeing something that Seth said?
No, Eden said you can't see it, but I have some very angry eyebrows right now.
Sorry. But I had this one, but I want to talk about it, a ton about it. I have had one, but I don't want to talk a ton about it. Got it. But yeah, so just anyways, just recognizing that, because that's important. Because I think also
sorry
let's
try that.
So we can see it better.
Yeah.
I think also like when it comes to like panic attacks, like it tries to convince you of one thing. And sometimes you have to be aggressive with those thoughts too. Like that's another thing that I do. Is like, no, I'm that's not the case at all. Like, I'll have to give more information on that again. Like what you brought up, Axe, is something that I haven't felt in a while, so I'm forgetting some of my details of how I personally process through it. But there's a certain amount of controlling my breathing. There's a certain amount of controlling my thoughts and getting them focused on something else. And there's a certain amount, if I can handle it and I can think about it in the moment of addressing the thought, if I can, which sometimes I can't. But if I can, then I do. And I just... I'm reminded of this too. I bring God into the situation.
Oh, God. That's
yes. Right. God is not an afterthought, but God is definitely a part of the process. So I'm like, I had to stop and think about this since you asked that question. But yes, I've definitely been like, God, please help. Like, and then He'll remind me of things like, like, Brandon, you had caffeine. Like, calm down. Like, that's your... Because I'll feel... The caffeine will make me feel anxious, and then I'll feel anxious for feeling anxious, and then it'll just spiral.
Well, have you noticed the consistency with it? Like, what do you think causes it, and does it always cause it? So, for instance, if it's... I don't know, a certain song, if like freaking Miley Cyrus comes on the radio and you start having...
It's the best of both worlds. What world do I choose?
Like, is it consistent? What causes it? Is it like... Is it... I wonder if it's... I almost said biomechanical, but that's not what I'm trying to say. Physiological type thing. Is it like, are you too hot, too cold? Is it you eat certain things? I'm just trying... Like I said, I've never had a panic attack, and I think I know people who have, but it still doesn't register as a thing. There's no object permanence for panic attacks for me.
Essentially, panic attacks is a situation where your mind just refuses to think logically, and you get so anxious and so tied up, your heart starts racing, your mind starts racing, your breath gets shallow, and it's just, you feel panicked, like something, like it's if a car is about to hit you, but there is no car.
So, okay, so from my perspective, if I have a friend or whatever, like let's say that we do something and you're having a panic attack, what should I do?
To help that person?
Yeah.
Well, don't tell them to snap out of it.
Hey, could you, you're making me uncomfortable. Could you stop?
Yeah, no, don't do that. That's not helpful at all. It depends on the person. There are many ways you can help it. If the person is open to touch, a hug could be helpful. You know, just having that warm embrace to know that you're there for them could be helpful. One of the girls that I dated, the thing that helped her was just help her count. And she began to count, and her counting helped her stop having a panic attack. Because, again, it's getting her mind off of what she was panicking about. Or talking a person through it was helpful. So it depends. It's not a one thing fits all persons.
Do you think in those moments exploring how the person's feeling helps? Or do you think saying, hey, you're having a panic attack, you need to calm down?
Or just saying you're okay.
Yeah.
You're okay. It's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Or just being there. Like, some people, they don't want to... Like, for me, and it may be a painful thing for them, just literally being there and not saying anything. You're just there. Could help.
So is this synonymous with how you would recommend people to engage you if you're feeling anxious too?
For me...
Because I know that I really poke you and I like prod you and I'm like, hey, dude... Let's stop being anxious. Let's stop being anxious,
yeah,
Brandon. Brandon, let's stop being anxious.
Okay. That makes me anxious. Not helpful. In my case, you know, like you trying to hug me or something, that doesn't help. But just like acknowledging what I'm going through does. You know, and being compassionate for what I'm feeling, even if you don't understand it, does. Because then I know that you're in my corner, which knows I'm safe. And then I can express what I'm going through without fear of judgment. So, in my case, that does help. And I'm seeing Seth is saying some things, so I'm going to go over to that real quick. Let's see. I don't know what was the last thing. Oh, okay. I think of Link when I think of courage. He's just stormed into a castle not knowing a thing. Way to go, Link. He is afraid of his automatic water from breathing form breathing techniques.
Low-key flex.
Just saying, talking or imitating panic attacks is actually very triggering for people with panic attacks. So talking or imitating, so like mocking someone, I guess she's trying to say, is can make them anxious. You need to ground them. Having one is embarrassing for most people as well, so don't downplay too much. And that's true, yeah, don't belittle people for what they're going through, because it's like, one, you're not communicating trust, or that you're a trustable person when you don't let them know it. Because that's the thing. People who struggle with anxiety often know, I think at least, what is right. It's just... They want to know if what they're going through is valid.
Yeah.
And if they're okay. And once they calm down, then they can rationally think through it and move on. But if you just belittle them or just trash them for what they're going through, all that does is make them not trust you and not trust themselves.
Yeah.
And then that makes the situation that much worse. And then Axe says, it all depends on what I'm doing, but usually spikes when I'm in close proximity to strangers. It starts by unconsciously holding my breath and then can degrade based on how the situation goes, is how panic attacks go for him in context. And so I think a lot of also working with panic attacks is addressing the thoughts beforehand, too. And that's something that's coming to me in this moment. Like, you don't want, like, it's like, think of a panic attack as like game day, and dealing with the thoughts that are involved in panic attacks is the work you do before game day comes. You wouldn't go straight into a tournament without preparation. Mm-hmm. In the same way, you don't know when the panic attack is going to hit, so before it hits, you begin addressing it while you can think rationally. So when the moment comes, you have pre-built thoughts ready to go that you can pull forward without having to think too hard on it to help stop the panic attack.
Yeah. So this is kind of off topic, but just from my own understanding, because once again, I don't really understand anxiety either. Mm-hmm. So if you guys are anxious and have a history and whatever, like I'd love to hear your opinions. But if you're feeling anxious, what's the best way for somebody to help you?
Yeah.
Is it the same thing as the panic attacks, like making them feel safe first in their corner? Like, what works for you guys? And if I ever encounter you and you're just like anxious, like what would you want me to do?
Well, the Bible, I think the Bible brings up a good example of it, and I think if I remember correctly, I need to figure it out. I know the general words. I don't remember where it's located.
Brandon,
but it was,
if you have to look up scriptures, you're not a good Christian.
Shut up. I think it says strengthen. That strength. Oh, you know what? I can just use the microphone. Strengthen the weak. No. Strengthen the timid. That's not even what I said. Strengthen the timid. Not the Timmons. Oh my God.
Welcome to ThoughtRaid, where we watch Brandon figure out technology.
I know.
Come on, Brandon.
I'm sorry. I'm trying.
Let's see what.
There we go. Timid. There was a scripture verse I know that talks about like helping those that are timid, and maybe I'm getting the words wrong because Google cannot find it immediately like I want it to. So whatever. Anyways, but I know that there's a scripture verse that mentions strengthen the timid. Essentially, when you're helping someone who deals with anxiety, it's more so about I feel like anxiety could be sometimes the opposite of pride in a sense, because like there is pride that's involved in it, whereas pride you kind of hit it hard and deal with it head on. Anxiety, you don't have to hit it, you more so have to like, hey, you're okay, and deal with it that way for the person to be okay. So I feel like helping people that deal with anxiety involves getting to where they're at and letting them know that what they're going through is not like abnormal. And then sharing with them better ways of thinking in that moment as they begin to calm down, and addressing that as they're calming down. Like, I feel like addressing the hard stuff comes after dealing with the anxiety, I think. I don't think it's always cut and dry like that, but I know that I'm much more receptive to hearing what you have to say once I know that you are not against me. And anxiety, that's the whole thing with anxiety. You don't know who or what to trust when you're anxious. So if someone comes to you and they're like, hey, like, I feel your pain, I understand what you're talking about, let me help you, I'm much more likely to listen to that person than I am to someone who says, just get over it. Like, you can tell me that because I've come to a place of trust with you and growth personally to deal with anxiety, so I know that I need to get over it, and I'm able to hear that. But if you don't have that pre-established relationship with a person and then you say get over it, there's just no power behind that, because it's like, get over what? That doesn't even address my problem, really.
Yeah, so you're saying like once you go through it with a person, you've built a relationship, you're more receptive to them saying, hey, you're just being anxious, this is just a thing,
Yeah.
Let's get past it, because in the past you've already acknowledged, okay, we've been here before. They're not against me, they're for me, so I have to trust what they're saying right now.
Yes, but even then, it's still good to be gentle in the process, because, like, the problem with anxiety is it's very forgetful. So you can be told 5,000 times the same exact thing, and it just takes time for it to go from here to here. And there's a lot of repetition that is involved in dealing with anxiety. If you are not taking the time to remind yourself of the truth when the anxiety arises, it's going to take time for it to go from here to here. Like, the only other way that things go from here to here is by living through it and coming to the other side of it. Like, that's perhaps the fastest way to get past anxiety, is to actually go through what you're anxious about. Just do it. Which is, again, just saying
COVID,
that.
just go get it.
Yeah, just do it.
COVID, just
get
get it over
COVID. Then you'll be fine. No.
Just go ahead and die. Like, once you're dead, you don't have to worry about it.
I mean, in all reality, technically, yes, but that's not. Let's not just jump right to death. But. A lot of me being okay in the situations that I've gone through, which are scarier than before, has also been because I have established over the years of taking anxious thoughts captive with the truth. You can't just let the anxious thoughts stay in your head. You have to address them with the truth. Otherwise, they fester. They don't get better, they get worse. You cannot sit with an anxious thought and expect for it to get better. You have to put it somewhere, and you have to address it.
How important do you think it is for people to have core friendships and people that are encouraging?
Very important.
To get on the other side of it.
Very important.
And also, if somebody doesn't have that, how would you recommend going about finding that?
There is a degree of risk taking that's involved, I feel like, in finding people that are trustworthy, because there is anxiety that's involved just getting to that place in the first place, like of mistrust and things of that nature. But I would say you know part of getting to that place is taking a risk, even though you're not going to like it, with people that you. Because here's the thing. The good news is, as you're trying to find people that are trustworthy and able to handle you and what you're going through and to tell you the truth and stuff, you may fail, and you may find people that are manipulative and not good, for truly not helpful in what you're going through. But you don't have to stay there. You can still find people that are trustworthy, and that's through taking risks and trying again. If there's anything that I could impart to people that struggle with anxiety, it is the determination to try again. Whatever you're going, if it failed, try again, because the more times you try in an area, the more likely you are to succeed. Especially in an area of personal growth and development, the more you try again, the more you eventually get to that place where you have the breakthrough. It's when you stop that you can't really kind of grow from that place. I mean, it's okay to put certain things on the back burner and focus in other areas, sure. But ultimately, you want to keep moving forward. And if you failed, try again. So if you find someone who is like, oh, I thought they were trustworthy, but they broke my trust, that's not the end of the world. Like, you could still find someone that is trustworthy if you try again. And Axe is saying, so he says, for me, the best thing that works when I am, the best thing that works is that I am left alone. If I have plenty of space and peace and quiet, it helps a ton. And yeah, having a place to kind of process through your thoughts is also good too. So I think when dealing with anxiety, there's a combination of having a space to process your thoughts alone, and having someone to process it with people. Because there are some things that you just won't be able to process until you're by yourself to kind of decompress. And there's some things that are just really hard to process without having someone there to bounce those thoughts off of. And I think as you get older and you experience more things, it gets easier figuring out which thoughts you can handle on your own and which ones you should take to other people through just living life and experimenting. Is any of this making sense? I feel like I've shot in 5,000 different directions.
Yeah, I think the big takeaways for me is just, like, I think I know this, but in the moment, it just doesn't compute to me because I can't relate to it, you know? just helping people feel safe and in their corner first, and just realizing that when people are being anxious, they don't know who or what to trust. Because I guess I'm just more rational and logical. I'm not saying that anxious people aren't rational or logical. I think it's just easier for me to default to that. It's like, well, I mean, I know this and this and this is true, so this feeling that I have, I can't trust it. And that's really easy for me.
Yeah.
You know? So
yeah,
that makes a lot of sense.
The way God describes in the Bible the mind of a person who deals with anxiety, it's like a wave tossed in the sea. Yeah. So what that essentially represents is like when I'm going through anxiety, I'm going this way, I'm going that way. This sounds pretty right, but this also sounds pretty right. I don't know what direction to go in, and please someone help me, type of thing.
Let me address this before you wrap up. Axeman said something earlier about rationalizing fear and anxiety. Do you think you can rationalize fear and anxiety?
It depends on what you mean by that, because fear and anxiety is a lie. It's always going to be the worst situation than what it actually is. You're always going to hype it up beyond. There are truths within it, I suppose. Otherwise, you wouldn't be so stuck. You wouldn't be anxious if there was no truth to it. But you can't really rationalize. You have to just respond to the fear and the anxiety with the truth. Because the longer you sit in it without taking it captive and dealing with it, the more real it becomes to you. And that's how you get people that are like, they say random things that make no sense whatsoever because they've sat in their fear and never done anything about it for so long, and now that's become reality to them.
Yeah. Cool.
So, yeah. So, I guess, let me think if I can recap some of this just to make it easy. When dealing with anxiety, it's very important to face it head on, to keep, you have to start. You can't wait for it to get better before you start dealing with it. Because if you don't get started, it's not going to, you're going to miss opportunity after opportunity. Courage is being afraid, but still moving forward. You don't have to have all the pieces. The economy doesn't have to be right. The stars don't have to align, whatever. Just keep moving forward. Whenever you're going through times of fear, it's important to have the truth deep inside of you. And that's where having friends are very important. Having God in your life is very important. Having a foundation is important. Because when panic does come, the only way you're going to be able to stand in those times is to develop for yourself a foundation of truth. So consider, again, panic attacks or moments of panic as game day. This is the tournament. This is where things get hit the hardest. If you've done no preparation of filling yourself up with the truth, so for instance, let's say, and this is something I went through just a year ago, you have a friend who they're a reliable friend, but they do things that make you feel anxious and insecure because it's different from what you're used to. There's going to come a day where game day is going to hit. The only way you're going to be able to stand strong in that relationship without sabotaging it is to remind yourself of who they are, who their character is, talking things out with them, working through the situation. So that way when the game day hits and crap hits the fan, you have a foundation with that person and with the fears that you can rely. Nope, I'm not going to begin to over-doubt this person. I'm not going to begin to just mutilate this relationship because of what I'm afraid of. We've had this conversation. We've been through these things. I can trust this person is a real good example. And just take that time to go into those scary thoughts and what is the truth of this situation? Is this truly real or not? You don't have to leave fear as this thing on the shelf that I can't touch this, because if I touch this, something bad will happen. No, take that thing off the shelf, examine it.
Check the expiration date.
Check the expiration date. What does the truth say about that? Because then when the time comes and the panic hits or the fear hits, you can stand strong in that moment and keep moving forward. And when the day comes, when you hit those things you're afraid of, let's say you've been working really hard on, spiders, and now there is a spider in the room, like, and you're feeling the panic coming on you. Like, life wants to hit you fast, but you don't have to go as fast as life hits. You can slow down. You can breathe deep. You can focus in on other things. The Bible talks about focus whenever things are lovely, whatever things are pure, if there any things of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on those things. You know, you can be anxious for nothing. Like, it's just focusing in on whatever things are good. You can shift your focus away from the panic onto other things.
At the disco. Never mind.
Panic
Every
at the
time
disco.
you say panic, I think, okay, he's going to say panic at the disco. It just never happens.
Sorry to disappoint you. But you can shift your focus away from those things. And then finally, if you don't deal with anxiety, but you have people in your life that do, it's really good to be understanding for them, because the quickest way to help someone who is anxious is to help them know that you are in their corner, that you understand what they're going through, and that they're not strange. Like, and trust me, they'll probably bring some very strange things to you, but I'm telling you, they're not the only one that's worried about those things. And so just understanding that, you know, putting yourself into the shoes best you can, not taking on their fears, but just understanding where they're coming from, that will help them calm down. That will help them trust you more. And then they'll be much more open for you to help them through what they're afraid of and to speak truth in the situation. As you get to know them more and they understand you and they're not afraid of you, you know, attacking them or leaving them, then you can be a little bit more rough with them if they're open to it. But other than that, like, just because there are moments. Other than that, being understanding is very important for someone who's dealing with anxiety, because they know what the reality is most of the time. It's just they need to calm down, and they need to know, are you there? Are you there in their corner for them? So, all that said, I think that's a good way of wrapping it up. So yeah, cool. Do you have anything before we end this, or are we good?
We're good.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you guys for watching. We broadcast every week on Mondays, Fridays, and Saturdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we'll be live tomorrow with a special guest, Jared Allen, where we'll be talking about realities of being a biracial man. I didn't word that great, but okay.
He says, I see a potential. I see a potential in my eyes. I see a potential. I never lost sight of the reason why you're alive. You're alive. You're alive. We sing Jesus.